The Unity Community Bank in Atlanta was a quiet place that Tuesday morning, the kind of quiet where you could hear the faint scratch of pens and the hum of an overworked AC. The sun filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows on the polished marble floor. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, an 82-year-old black woman with silver hair tied back in a neat bun, stood at the counter. Her hands, lined with the stories of a life well lived, held a withdrawal slip for $200, money she'd saved for her granddaughter's college textbooks. She'd been a customer here for 47 years, her loyalty as steady as the oak tree in her backyard. But today, the teller, a young guy named Travis with a smug grin and a chip on his shoulder, was making her feel like a stranger. "Ma'am, I need 2 forms of ID, Travis said, his tone sharp, his eyes barely meeting hers. "And they better be valid. We don't just hand out cash to anyone." Mrs. Carter's chest tightened. She'd heard that tone before. Decades ago, in segregated diners, in stores where she was followed like a thief. She straightened, her voice calm but firm. "Young man, my ID is valid. I've been banking here since your parents were in diapers. Please process my withdrawal." Travis leaned back, his smirk growing. "Rules are rules, Grandma. No ID, no money. Maybe try another branch." He slid the slip back toward her, not even glancing at the driver's license she'd placed on the counter. The line behind her, businessmen in suits, a mom with a stroller, a couple of college kids, shifted awkwardly. No one said a word. Eyes dropped to the floor, to phones, anywhere but the scene unfolding. Mrs. Carter's hands shook slightly, not from fear but from the sting of humiliation. She'd raised 3 kids, buried a husband, and built a life against the odds, but moments like this still cut deep. She opened her mouth to respond, but a sharp sound broke the silence. The scrape of a chair. Heads turned. At the back of the waiting area, a man stood. Lean, muscular, with a bald head that caught the light and eyes that could cut through steel. Jason Statham. Yes, the Jason Statham, the action star whose face was plastered on every streaming service. He wasn't here for a role or a stunt. He was just a guy, waiting to deposit a check, who'd seen enough to know this wasn't right. The room felt different the moment he moved. Travis's smirk flickered, his fingers twitching on the counter. Jason crossed the floor, his boots clicking with purpose, and stopped beside Mrs. Carter. He didn't touch her, didn't crowd her space, but his presence was a shield. He looked at Travis, his voice low, controlled, with that British edge that made every word hit harder. "You didn't even look at her ID, Jason said, his eyes locked on Travis. "You saw a black woman, made up your mind, and decided to flex your little bit of power. That's not how this works." Travis's face flushed, his bravado cracking. I'm just following protocol, sir. You don't understand." "I understand plenty," Jason cut him off, leaning forward just enough to make Travis shrink back. "You've got a woman here who's been banking with you lot longer than you've been alive, and you're treating her like she's begging for scraps. Check her ID. Process her withdrawal. And apologize while you're at it." The bank was so quiet you could hear the clock tick. A woman in line coughed nervously. Mrs. Carter glanced at Jason, her expression a mix of gratitude and caution. She wasn't used to strangers stepping in, especially not like this. But something in his eyes, steady, not showy, told her he wasn't doing this for clout. Travis fumbled with the ID, his hands shaking as he scanned it. It's valid," he muttered, his voice barely audible. He started typing, processing the withdrawal, but his eyes kept darting to Jason, who hadn't moved. "Apologize," Jason said again, not loud, but with a weight that filled the room. Travis swallowed hard. I'm sorry, ma'am," he mumbled, his face burning. "It was a mistake." Mrs. Carter looked at him, her gaze steady, piercing. "It wasn't a mistake, young man. It was a choice. Don't make it again. Her voice was quiet but carried the strength of someone who'd spent a lifetime proving herself. The tension broke as the bank manager, Linda, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense air, hurried over. She'd been in the back but had caught the tail end of the exchange. "Mrs. Carter, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice genuine. "This should never have happened. Your withdrawal is processed, and I'm waiving all fees on your account, permanently. Travis, we'll talk later." Travis nodded, his head down, his arrogance gone. Mrs. Carter took her cash, tucking it into her purse with care. She turned to Jason, her eyes soft but proud. "You didn't have to do that, Mr. Statham. But I'm grateful you did." Jason gave a small nod, his tough guy facade cracking just enough to show a flicker of warmth. "No one should have to fight for what's theirs, ma'am. Not in a place like this." As Mrs. Carter walked toward the exit, a young woman burst through the doors, her granddaughter, Aisha, who'd been waiting in the car. "Grandma, you okay?" Aisha asked, her eyes wide with worry. "I'm fine, baby," Mrs. Carter said, smiling as she hugged her. "Just had a little help today." She glanced back at Jason, who was already heading back to his seat, as if nothing had happened. But something had. The people in line were different now, less avoidant, more present. A man in a suit approached Mrs. Carter, his voice low. "I should have said something. I'm sorry." A young woman with a stroller nodded, her eyes misty. "You didn't deserve that, ma'am." Mrs. Carter waved them off kindly. "It's not about deserving. It's about doing better next time." Outside, the Atlanta sun was brutal, but Mrs. Carter felt lighter as she and Aisha walked to the car. Aisha was already typing on her phone, posting about the badass bald guy who'd stood up for her grandma. By evening, the story was blowing up on X, clips from the bank's security footage, shared by a bystander, showing Jason's quiet intensity and Mrs. Carter's unshakable dignity. The comments poured in, "This is what respect looks like. Mrs. Carter's a queen. Jason Statham's a real one." Back at the bank, Jason finished his deposit and left without fanfare. He didn't check his phone, didn't care about the viral buzz. He'd done what felt right, not for likes or headlines, but because he'd seen a woman who reminded him of his own Nan, strong, proud, and too often overlooked. As he drove off, he thought about Mrs. Carter's words, "It was a choice." And he knew he'd made the right one. Mrs. Carter got home, set the $200 on the kitchen table, and called her granddaughter over. "This is for your books, Aisha. And don't you ever let anyone make you feel small." Aisha nodded, tears in her eyes, and hugged her grandma tight. The next day, a small envelope arrived at Mrs. Carter's house. Inside was a note from Jason, "If you ever need anything, you call J.S." Tucked in with it was a gift card to a local bookstore, enough to cover Aisha's textbooks and more. Mrs. Carter smiled, tucking the note into her Bible. She didn't need the gift card, but she'd keep it. A reminder that sometimes, in the ugliest moments, kindness could still win.